Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz and I'm joined by my fantastic co-hosts. Up first, his 9 lives familiar is on its 8th life. It's Matt Morgan.
I recently lost my partner. She said it was because I was a compulsive gambler, and all I can think now is how to win her back. What do you think the odds are that I can pull it off, though?
Matt, I just gotta say, when you opened with "I lost my partner," I did not suspect there would be a gambling joke appearing there. I was actually fully having a conniption over here. You give me heart palpitations, bro.
I mean, sorry, I need to show my hand a little earlier. That's my fault. I've always had that problem, so I'll work on it, yeah.
Okay. Oh, no. We're going to roulette on over to our next introduction. That was pretty forced. All right. Up next, his 9 lives familiar did the thing that all cats do and just knocked something else off the table. It's Dana Roach.
Similar to Matt, actually, I need to get serious here for a moment. I realized a couple weeks back that I had developed a real problem with the hokey pokey. But luckily, I was able to turn myself around.
Turn yourself around.
That's what it's all about.
Saw it coming.
Oh, no. Saw it coming is a completely different Magic card, Matt. I think that one's from Called Hunt.
That's, a whole different game.
Well, hey, Matt, what are we talking about in this week's episode?
Well, so we've seen a lot of Magic sets in the past year, and we just want to take a chance that we've seen hopefully all the Magic cards we're going to get this year. We want to talk about what we think the set of the year could be, because I think all three of us have very different opinions on this.
Yeah, there have been plenty of sets this year, but what would we call the, quote, set of the year, where we look back in a couple years on the year 2024 and say, that's the set that I remember immediately, like that's the one that stands out. Let's talk about it right now. Right now is after a couple of quick shout-outs, though.
Well, we are proud members of Team Ultimate Guard. If you like a product that you use that makes it easy to recommend, and we all like and use Ultimate Guard sleeves and their deck boxes, and even their backpacks, which we found out at MagicCon Vegas that the Ultimate Guard booth had been told they were recommended by us, and they sold out of those backpacks. So thanks to all of you out there for making us look good to people at Ultimate Guard. Usually we need an editor and filters to make ourselves look good, but you did it for us. So thank you all very much.
And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so in a lot of different ways. You can like this video, you can subscribe on YouTube, you can leave a review on your local podcast app, just free ways to show this some support, which we always appreciate. Or if you are so moved to, you can head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast. We have patron tiers of all sorts of levels over there. Whether you want to see all the episodes a day early, you can join our Discord community. There's all sorts of things over there. It's a nice way to get a little benefit for yourself in exchange for supporting us financially. So thank you to all of our patrons first off, but also we have a very special patron tier, which just you are in the running to get the patron shout out of the week on the show here. So this week we want to give a very special shout out to Edric Sanchez. So Edric, right away, you have a magical name. So thank you so much for signing up for one, but also you scare us with that Edric name just a little bit.
It's a powerful Dana can attest. That's a powerful commander.
It is. And we appreciate you and all you've done for Fiora. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you to the Spymaster of Trest. All right, guys, let's get into our topic now. We're asking the question, what is the set of the year? Which means, real quick, we got to do a recap on which sets were actually coming out this year. There's a bit of a list. Bear with me. This year we had Ravnica Remastered, which was an all reprint set, so frankly, we're not even really counting that. But we also had Murders at Karlov Manor, which also contained the Clue set. We had the Fallout set, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, Modern Horizons 3, Assassin's Creed, Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, and one that I know Matt's very excited to talk about, Magic Foundations.
Yes, Foundations so far, granted, I haven't gotten my hands on any of the cards yet because the set just got previewed last week, but oh my goodness, I'm very excited about what the set is going to do for Magic in general, not just for Commander, but just Magic players just all over the place, no matter what formats you're playing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, should we go back to the beginning of the year then and start just looking at these sets and kind of give everyone our thoughts on each of them as we go through?
Yeah, see what the contenders were and maybe build up to what we thought our favorites were.
Yeah.
If the first one here I think probably worth talking about is Murders at Karlov Manor, which is the most poorly named set in Magic's history, since I'm still to this day calling it Murders at Markov Manor, and I had to look at my notes right now to make myself not say it incorrectly.
Yeah, I don't think any set has ever had its name butchered as much as Karlov Manor did, and that's kind of indicative of just the set in general. I think for a lot of people, it just felt very, very miss. It didn't really commit to a lot of what it was trying to do. There weren't a ton of highly impactful cards. And we did get fetchable duels that surveilled. Those alone were super impactful on just any level you can imagine. But other than that, I don't really know a whole lot that Karlov Manor gave Commander especially. I mean, granted, we did get one of the most obnoxious commanders in the probably past couple of years with Voja, Jaws of the Conclave.
Yeah.
And I can't fault a good boy for being a good boy, but also sometimes you tell dogs to sit, and that would have been great.
Yeah. Voja currently has 11,000 decks to its name. And the Surveil dual lands, Matt, you're absolutely right. Those are huge. Like the card Underground Mortuary has 12% popularity, for instance. Ooh. And that's a nice standout. But if the best thing that I can say for a set is its lands in the 99, I'm not sure that that's the thing that really like grabs me. And of course, there's also the fact that the set itself and its story was a little bit of a nightmare. It did not seem to resonate very strongly with people.
No, Joey. The nightmares were in Duskmourn. You got that backwards.
True. So what it sounds like is that we don't think that MKM is a good contender for set of the year. In fact, I think it might be my worst set of the year. I think that was probably the low point of 2024.
I would agree with that. It didn't work for me on a card or mechanical level, and it definitely didn't work for me like aesthetically or thematically. This was my biggest miss of the year for sure.
I think that's pretty safe to say. I don't know if I 100% agree, but as far as sets that were offering new cards, Karlov Manor didn't do a very great job, I guess.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Well, there was also the Fallout set at the beginning of the year. Matt, I know you're a big Fallout fan. Did that set make a really big impression? Big enough to be the set of the year for you? Or where does it fall?
I mean, it felt like I got hit with a megaton of bricks. And that's a Fallout reference, Joey. I know you don't play Fallouts, but making sure you got the reference. I loved Fallout.
Way over my head.
Yeah, way over your head. That's fine. But I mean, Dana, you and I got to play a little bit with some of the precons at Command Fest San Francisco when we went out to that event.
Yep.
I really liked the set. It was a lot of fun. The flavor there and just seeing how it was translated from Fallout, the video games, into Magic the Gathering on cards. I loved it. It was a lot of fun to see. They're doing that a lot with cards now, and I think this was probably one of the better executed as far as the flavor carrying over. Probably one of the better sets of the year, I would say, on that front, for sure.
I liked it quite a bit, too. And there's a handful of cards that have made their way into my deck, which I appreciate. For me, the Warhammer Commander precons are like the gold star. That's the what you want to hit if you're taking a UB product and making it into a set or deck. This didn't quite live up to that, so it also is hampered. It's a small set. There's a small collection of cards, and like that's going to just automatically prevent it from probably being set of the year because some big set with a bunch of home runs is going to outshine it. And I liked it a lot. I love a smaller set like this. That's a property that I enjoy. I liked it. Can't be set of the year because it's too small, I would say.
That's fair, yeah.
Yeah, between how they did Fallout and how they did Lord of the Rings, it gives me a ton of excitement for Final Fantasy coming out next year.
Yeah.
That Fallout and Final Fantasy are granted, they're two of the biggest game franchises in general, but I love both of those franchises. I'm very, very excited to see what they do with Final Fantasy next year.
Yeah. Fallout didn't really make as much an impression on me.
Sure.
The Wise Mothman is the most played commander from that set, 12,000 decks to its name, good for it. The most popular cards from that were also a cycle of lands, the enemy filter lands, like Viridescent Bog, for instance. That one has 8% popularity, which is, pretty good. But then those were also immediately reprinted throughout the rest of the year. So they don't even feel particularly attached to Fallout for me. Of the sets this year, this might have been the one that had the fewest cards that I added to my own personal decks. So that's why I rank it pretty low, even though I'm not mad about its execution. But it doesn't rank as my set of the year either. So I kind of move on from it. I've moved on from the Fallout. I've rose in instead.
That makes it. But also the set was kind of hard to get a hold of too. I think that's one big knock that people had against it. Because you couldn't get cards. You couldn't get the cards to put in the decks because it was just so dang hard to get hold of anything for it. So there's just way less supply out there. So I think that might be the biggest reason people like Joey didn't have a chance to put cards in there because they never saw them in the wild. It was so hard to get hold of.
It's not that I didn't have the chance to. I've had the chance to buy the singles, and there haven't been a lot of singles that I feel compelled to go get, is really what I mean.
Fair.
Well, let's move on to something a little bit larger that had a lot more cards, at least for me in my decks. Outlaws Thunder Junction. Looking at a list of cards that made their way into my decks, there's just quite a few out of Thunder Junction that did. So like mechanically, I liked the set. There was a lot of fun cards. It also had the advantage of having the big score kind of mini add-on set that was filled with absolute heaters. There's a bunch of good cards in the big score bonus sheet. So like in terms of cards that go into my deck, this is way up there in terms of sets I liked. But I thought their attempt to shoehorn a Western set into Magic lore was handled inelegantly, would be the way I would phrase it.
Yeah.
Magic's in the past done this a gazillion times. Theros being a set hinging around Greek mythology, Amonkhet hinging around Egyptian mythology. Like they can take a inspiration and find a way to meld it into Magic quite seamlessly. They didn't do that here, at least in my mind, and that's going to keep it from being set of the year for me, if for no other reason than it just felt clunky.
Yeah, that was probably the most weighted butt in the history of the show, Dana. But I absolutely agree. I struggled so much, the disconnect with just everything they were trying to do flavor-wise with, okay, what if Rakdos but had a bandolier? And that was, and I really struggled with that. The flavor to me didn't carry over.
Yeah.
And it really just, to me, and we've said this a lot on the show this year, and I guess this is the final time we'll mention it this year. It felt a lot like Magic didn't really believe in its own IP anymore, and it had to kind of take everything from other inspirations and just make it so on the nose that they're kind of beating you over the head with it. And I really struggled with it because it almost felt like Magic didn't believe in its own strengths anymore, and the strengths in the storytelling.
There was literally a State of Design article from Mark Rosewater about last year's sets, and one of the lessons that he said as a big takeaway from the previous year, one of the first lesson on it was we were too on the nose with our tropes.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, 2024 had some of the same problems with some of its main settings. And I definitely feel that with OTJ. I'm personally a little bit sad that this was a set that was full of a bunch of villain characters. And it was so devoted to the Western stylings that I almost forgot that there's a lot of villains in here. And I actually would have loved to see a set that was designed with a bunch of villains from the ground up and what that might have looked like. Because that seems like you would have had something very different than just it happens to be a Western setting. So I think that's kind of a thing that I saw there. And with MKM, to be honest, the way that the story was forced to be told changed what I think a story like that could have done with those characters. And that's a bummer for me as well. And so flavorfully also didn't land. I wasn't mad at the cards. The spree mechanic was certainly fun as well. Some cards give me question marks, like Smuggler's Surprise. I still don't get why there's a Trojan horse in the Western set. But overall, it's just you know what? Okay, that sure was a set that happened. It didn't necessarily impress me as much though.
Well, and the decks itself, just the stats behind the set kind of are lagging behind too. You have Obeka Splitter of Seconds, didn't even break 10,000 decks, and of all the sets that are that old, it's the only one that hasn't done that yet.
Right.
So it is kind of telling that, granted, also, there were just a billion legends, it felt like. There were more legends in this set than probably any other at the time, I suppose. But it did feel like this was just jam-packed full of so many different legends trying to do so many different things, and just, it felt overcrowded, which is kind of weird for a set that's, placed in the Wild West in a desert. You'd think they'd have lots of space, but it was extremely crowded. And cards like Insatiable Avarice, still, not even 40,000 decks yet.
I'll also say that the precons for that set, when playing them against each other, it felt like the precons were always going to play out exactly the same way every time. That Stella Lee deck is going to storm off, and I don't think the rest of the decks are always quite as balanced or equipped to rein that in. So it felt like that experience with the precons also didn't necessarily make a great impression on me either. I'm sorry, OTJ. I did build one commander from this set. I gave the new Honest Rutstein a chance. But aside from that, I'm Outlaws. I don't want to linger in Thunder Junction for too much longer.
Well, why don't we move on to a set that it's kind of hard to argue didn't have an impact. It certainly had an impact on pretty much any set it was legal in, and that's Modern Horizons 3. That set did so much to so many formats, kind of like every Modern Horizons up to this point has.
Yeah, this is to me kind of the opposite problem with Fallout, where Fallout didn't have enough cards. This is designed to be a bomb. This set it's a premium set with a premium price designed to affect a highly competitive format. I would have a tough time calling this set of the year just because it's kind of cheating. It's designed to be set of the year in a lot of ways. That said, it's worth noting this is filled with cards that made its way into my decks.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, both strong ones and just like weird, interesting ones that because of the way they built the set, they just work in Commander decks in really good ways.
Yeah, Dana, I'm with you. I actually, I won't spoil too much here necessarily, but I went through and tracked all of my decks, went onto my Archedeck profile, and I sorted all of my decks by date added so that I could pretty easily see when I had made updates and what cards they were. And I counted how many cards, how many decks of mine were affected by each set, basically. Like, did this deck get cards from Modern Horizons? Did this deck get cards from Duskmourn or Bloomburrow, stuff like that? Modern Horizons 3 is tied for first in terms of my number of decks affected. And I think that's largely owing to the MDFCs, the Boggart Trawlers and Sink into Stupors. Those are some very impressive cards that made their way into a lot of places. So this definitely had, for me at least, one of the biggest impacts in terms of decks I actually, cards I actually play. But I am with you, since it is a premium set, it's hard for me to say, well, therefore, it's got a premium price. And I do have to give that kind of a knock against it, because that's, like you said, it is designed to be a bomb of a set. So like, it feels a little bit like cheating to say like, oh, this is definitely the set of the year.
Yeah.
And also emotionally, I don't know that I feel attached to it that way either.
Yes.
So
yeah, it's an all-star game.
Yeah, just because it was the most impactful set, I think is very safe to say for Modern Horizons 3. Doesn't mean it was the set of the year. I think it was very intentionally designed to do that. And because of that, the expectations weren't exceeded in the way that other sets were. I think that's probably a safe way to kind of justify how we're personally dubbing the set of the year, because everybody knew this set was going to introduce wildly powerful cards. And if it didn't, we'd be pretty disappointed. Thankfully, we only got one Nadu, which got banned from the format. But the rest of the commanders, I mean, I got to play against a Heragast deck at MagicCon Las Vegas, and holy cow, what were they thinking? Because that thing was just nuts. It was so wild to see. So yeah, we were supposed to get these super, super powerful, we hate to say the word, but staple quality cards like Sink into Stupor, like Fell the Profane, like Shifting Woodland has been bonkers whenever I've seen it.
It's a good land.
We were supposed to get all of those types of cards, though. We're not supposed to get those types of cards or those types of feels on other sets.
I would say no single card this year has changed the face of a game I'm playing more frequently than Talon Gates of Madara.
Sure.
Either like me cracking an Urza's Cave or just playing it from hand to blank out a blocker or save something of mine or whatever. Like that it has been a ridiculous card. But again, it's from this set where like it's supposed to be a ridiculous card. So
yeah, I think this is also a good stopping point for us to acknowledge what are the lenses that we use to try and evaluate the set of the year. Matt, you just mentioned impact. Dana, you've mentioned price. I mean, reprints are big, but so's the price. The important or fun commanders that come out of it, any noteworthy cards for sure, but also like the setting, new mechanics that it introduces, the impact that it has on our decks, and overall health of the commander format is also a really big deal. And the fact that this set had a card that got banned, can't lie, that's a knock against it.
Yeah.
It just kind of has to be.
Very much agree.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we have one little tiny baby set we can talk about here before we move into Challenge of Stats. And that would be Assassin's Creed. There's not a lot of cards here. I think this is going to suffer from the Fallout problem, I would wager, for all of us. But actually, I think this is maybe the most underappreciated set of the year. I think it flew under the radar because as an IP goes, it's less flashy than your Final Fantasies, your Marvels, whatever. And it was a small set, and it came out amidst a deluge of other sets. So I think people kind of miss this, but there's a lot of quietly very good cards in this set, and I think it is underappreciated despite the fact that it is so small and did get overlooked.
Quietly. So you're saying that the Assassin's Creed, it's kind of like on theme with it's going to sneak there and assassinate you in the game.
Sneakily powerful.
I'm assuming Joey doesn't want to talk about this because I put Abstergo Entertainment in all of my decks, and he doesn't want me
Exile Hammer Graveyard.
Having another Scavenger Grounds to blow away his graveyard.
I'm surprised that Abstergo Entertainment is not the most popular card from that set, to be honest. Instead, it's Brotherhood Regalia, which is a very interesting equipment. It's a pretty decent piece of work. It's showing up in 3% of decks that are able to play it. And the most popular commander from Assassin's Creed is Ezio Auditore, which has got 7,700 decks to its name. So the set's doing okay, but Dana, I agree with your assessment. It probably is a little underrated. There will more than likely be several gems to discover from it, in future years. But I think it is also so Assassins centric that for me, I'm like, well, if I don't care about Assassins, it's hard to get really activated about those or any of the other cards surrounding them in the set. So this is another one that, like, I've kind of let that sleeping dog lie for a little bit.
It was so parasitic. I think that's a really good way to put it, Joey. Yeah, you needed to really dive in and really appreciate the flavor and what they were trying to do. But because what the set was trying to do was so narrow, and again, suffers from being a small set, there were still some really, really cool cards. Arbaugh's Mirror, I've put in any card that cares about making any sort of historic permanent, whether it's tokens, like artifact tokens, whether it's legends, anything. That card does work. So there's definitely very, very powerful cards. Or Shay Cormac, that card I've had a lot of fun with. Just getting really, really big, putting bounty counters on things just for going about the game. I don't have to do anything to warp my playstyle to make, accommodations for some of these cards. So there's great cards in there, but again, I think just how parasitic it was and how small of a set it was, if you weren't very interested in doing like that very specific thing, you probably just didn't care about the set.
Well, guys, we've talked about a bunch of sets that don't necessarily meet our criterion for being best set of the year. But there are 3 more that happened this year. And I think it's safe to say that Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, and Foundations are going to capture a bit of our interest and possibly cause a little bit of debate in the latter half of this show as we try and decide which of those 3 at the end of the year really takes the cake. So we're going to really dig deep in the second half of the show, but we've got to pause real quick because there's another thing that we love doing on the show here, and that is challenging some stats. There's a lot of data on EDHREC that we don't always agree with, so we're going to challenge some stats and then come back with that answer to that question, what is the set of the year?
I was waiting to have someone inadvertently mention the card I'm going to challenge right now in our last little Assassin's Creed segment there, because my challenge this week is for the card Restart Sequence from Assassin's Creed, particularly in Kali the Vast decks, but really any deck where your commander has access to that card and probably has evasion. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is because people miss the fact that there's 2 words on the end of the free running mechanic that they gloss over. And we just a few minutes talked about how parasitic Assassin's Creed as a set is. The way free running works is you can cast a spell for its cost. And in this case, with Restart Sequence, it's 3 and a black. Or you can cast it for its free running cost, which is 1 and a black. And you may cast this spell for its free running cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or commander. And I think people have often overlooked that or commander portion of this. It's one of the reasons I challenged stats on Eagle Vision a month or 2 back. That's a really good draw spell. Similarly here, Restart Sequence lets you bring a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield for 1 and a black mana if you've dealt combat damage with a commander. It's only in 17 Kali decks. That's a commander where you have giant casting cost angels and demons and dragons that are often going to be in your graveyard that you want to get back into play after someone's removed them. Right now, there are almost 7,000 decks running Reanimate, so people clearly want to have an option to bring stuff back. There's 17 decks running Restart Sequence. It's just going to cost 1 more mana if you swing with Kalia, which you're going to be doing all the time in that deck. And it's not going to dome you for 7 damage if you reanimate a 7 mana dragon or something.
See also the card Overpowering Attack, which can be 3 mana if you free run it, and it gives you an extra combat.
Yeah.
Free running cards are very, very cool.
So just in general, look at anything with a free running mechanic and see if you have a commander that's just frequently going to punch through for damage. It just lets you cast spells for way less mana than you should be able to, and there's a lot of really good ones there.
Yeah, cool stuff. I'll move to our listener submitted challenge the stats. This week we've got an email from Daniel Griswold who wanted to talk about a card that's potentially overplayed in Gearsenstarn Kellermorph decks. As a quick reminder, Gearsenstarn Kellermorph is a 3 mana Izzet 3/2 Tyrannid human with Ward 2 wizards. Why? Don't know that it needed that, but it has this very special ability. Whenever another source you control deals exactly 1 damage to a permanent or player, Gearsenstarn Kellermorph deals 2 damage to that permanent or player. So that's going to amplify all of your exactly 1 damage pings. It's going to amplify them up a whole bunch. This is currently the rank 24 commander in all of the commander format right now. It's got 15,000 decks to its name. Very, very impressive. But Daniel wanted to challenge a particular card in this deck, and that is Chandra Awakened Inferno, which is currently showing up in about 11% of Gearsenstarn decks. Chandra Awakened Inferno has a plus ability that makes emblems that deal 1 damage to your opponent, and those emblems do not go away. It seems potentially here folks might think that the Chandra emblems are affected by Gearson's ability. Unfortunately, that is not the case. When a player has an emblem, that is not a, quote, source that you control the way that Gearson would care about. That emblem is theirs. They created that emblem. The emblem is both owned and controlled by the player who has it. So even though your card made it, it is not actually your emblem. You are not affecting the damage further from there. I'll also throw in here that it's a 6 mana card, and Gearston Starn decks are pretty low to the ground. I don't know that they necessarily need it. 11% is not the biggest inclusion rate that we've ever seen for a commander like this, but since there are so many Gearston Starn decks out there, 15,000, this is roughly 1,700 players out there that might be running this potential non-bow. So Daniel Griswold, thank you for giving us this challenge to help people find even more efficient and maybe more mana efficient ways to deal much more damage to their opponents when they're playing this deck.
Well, I'll wrap us up then real quick. So Kona Rescue Beastie is from the Duskmourn set that just came out a little bit ago. 3 and a green for a legendary creature that's all about, at the beginning of your second main phase, you want Kona to be tapped because then you can put a permanent from your hand onto the battlefield. So there's a lot of different ways that this deck is getting Kona tapped, whether it's cards like Enduring Vitality that came out in the same set, which are just super, super powerful. There's all sorts of different ways you can tap it for mana with Relic of Legends, but one option that isn't showing up very much at all that I think is kind of silly is Elven Chorus. So Elven Chorus is 3 and a green for enchantment that says you can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast creature spells from the top of your library, and then you can still have creatures that you control tap to add 1 mana of any color. So you still get a mana rock out of this, which turns all of your creatures into mana dorks, but you get a card advantage engine baked into it, which is something that a lot of the different options aren't offering. Now, yes, there are some cheaper options, but for 4 mana, it's only a 1 or 2 mana more than most of the other options out there, like Cryptolith Rite or other things like that. So Elven Chorus is just absolutely a powerful card because it does the thing you want to be doing in the Kona deck, but also letting you crank through your deck and find those big, powerful haymakers and giving you some advantage all at the same time. So only 10% of Kona decks are playing Elven Chorus currently. I think that number is significantly too low. It's such a powerful thing. It's doing what cards that are staples in the deck are doing, getting played in 80+% of decks, like Enduring Vitality. So if you need another option, because you always want to make sure you have a few of them in decks that are kind of focused around a certain strategy and certain synergy, you need backups, and Elven Chorus is way better than the 10% of decks that are playing it currently.
All right, guys, back to our main topic here. As folks can probably deduce, there are 3 main sets from this year that are left that we didn't tackle already: Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, and Magic Foundations. I think it's safe to say that we've kind of narrowed down a couple of options about what we think might be set of the year. And I think we here now just kind of want to make a case for what is the best set of the year, because some of the other ones maybe were not necessarily doing it for us, but we each like these for different reasons. And I guess we kind of just want to go through them.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask the typical Magic player too what their favorite set of the year is, in a couple of months, it's going to be one of these 3 sets. I would be shocked if a significant percentage of people said it was not one of these 3 sets. And
I'm going to guess most of them pick Bloomburrow.
Same.
I feel like that's going to be the public consensus as their favorite set of the year.
Okay.
It was not my favorite set of the year. I liked it quite a bit, and I appreciated that it felt more like a traditional Magic set, me being a paper boomer. I was looking for something to feel like what I identify as a Magic set in terms of vibes. It had it more than, Magic the Hattening sets we had earlier in the year.
Sure.
But it still didn't entirely have it. Like every single, thing was a creature, was an animal-based creature, even the planeswalkers that we got. It was still not 100% what I wanted in terms of vibes. There was a lot of good cards. I enjoyed it. It didn't quite break through to the set of the year for me because it still felt a little bit off. How about either of you two? Was it your favorite, Joey? Did this make the cut for you?
Sadly, no. Aesthetically, yes, it's probably the set of the year. There's not a single person I've met who is like, oh no, I can't stand what they did aesthetically with Bloomburrow. I think the aesthetics are so strong that it sticks out very, very, just huge in people's minds. Mechanically, this set passed through me. There are very, very few cards from this set that actually made their way into my decks. A couple of neat ones like Wear Down is a pretty good removal spell. The gift mechanic, though, wasn't necessarily my favorite. The Offspring mechanic, it felt just so mechanically powerful that I felt disconnected from the flavor that it was trying to execute on. And the fact that it was so focused on being a creature type set and food stuff, like a lot of those are mechanics that I actually don't necessarily even enjoy playing. And from what I understand, the limited environment is a little bit strained as a result of parts of that too. So that's why Bloomburrow, while visually it was a treat, the actual execution and playing of the cards for me didn't quite hit.
I can see why it didn't strike and resonate with some people because of the gameplay. Because if you didn't like the specific strategies they were trying to buy into, sure, yeah, it was very, very hyper focused on a few of those things. I didn't play any limited in this set, so I can't really comment on that. But of all the different things they were trying to do, things they hadn't, external forces having super heavy influences on a Magic set, whether it was, like we said, Outlaws, Thunder Junction, like Duskmourn, Bloomburrow felt the most like it belonged on Magic cards. And so the vibes of it, I think, did a really, really good job. It had the obvious heavy-handed Redwall influences, but I grew up reading Redwall. I really liked the flavor. I enjoyed kind of opening packs and seeing how that was going to get expressed on Magic cards. And flavorfully, there were still some extremely powerful cards too.
Yeah, there was definitely, like, looking at my list, there's a lot of cards here that made their way in. I will also, however, note a lot of the cards that made their way in my decks are just variants of existing cards. Dire Sight's a great card, and it's in a bunch of my black decks, but it's just Read the Bones with, Surveil instead of Scry.
Sure.
A lot of the cards that found their way into my decks weren't necessarily something that was new or unique. It was just a cool version or a new version of a thing we already had. And obviously that's something that happens a lot. Everything is kicker, right? But I felt like that was also a bit of a detriment in my mind for Bloomburrow, is a lot of the cards I kept in decks were ones that didn't feel particularly unique or interesting. They were just good.
I think this does come down to us not playing a lot of like creature type focused decks, though, Dana. That's kind of a thing that I think you and I have in common. Like the card 3 Tree City is the most popular card from the set, and that's sort of a Nykthos but for creature types.
Right.
And it's shown up in 71,000 decks, 5% of decks that can play it. And the next most popular card is Patchwork Banner, which is a mana rock that also anthems for a specific creature type. And those are exciting for the players for whom it's exciting. But that might be why this in particular missed at least the two of us.
Yeah, of the top 6 cards, I have put 5 of them into multiple decks.
Nice.
I haven't bought a 3 Tree City. I don't want to spend that much money on, effectively, like you said, a Nykthos for creature types. But Patchwork Banner was maybe one of the cards of the year for me, just because even if I'm not building around a specific deck, I have decks like the Council of Four that make a ton of knights. I'm not building to make knights, but it just happens to be a super powerful mana rock that also buffs up what my commander does by accident. It's so good. Innkeeper's Talent is also just inappropriately powerful,
and Caretaker's Talent, to be true. Like, both of those are so great.
Caretaker's Talent, and Fountain Port is just it's kind of a trading post on a land type of effect. So I love Fountain Port too. The gift mechanic I didn't love, because I don't want to give my opponents anything, because I want to just get more for myself. But other than that, like I've put a ton of cards from Bloomburrow into decks, even though like flavorfully I don't get super into like the anthropomorphication of the characters, but beyond that, like this set was so good. There's a lot going on.
I'll also give it up to the precon here that really stands out to me as like especially a memorable thing from Bloomburrow was the Miss Bumbleflower deck, which took Group Hug in a new direction that was very proactive and very powerful and very like that sticks out to me as an especially positive thing. Bloomburrow does have one of the precons that had a particularly low reprint value too, though, which is not the worst knock against it, but like it was inconsistent is I guess what I'll say, compared to some of the other sets that had a much more high and consistent reprint value throughout all of their precon deck offerings. Those are a couple of other data points that stick in my mind. I look at Bloomburrow fondly. I wish that it had made more of a mechanical impact on my decks in particular.
Sure.
But I think this just, for me, just kind of comes down to, well, I play a lot of gross graveyard stuff. So this is a very personal bias that I can't necessarily escape from.
Fair.
I enjoy the set. I hope I find more hidden gems from it in the future. And for the folks for whom this set did resonate, it resonated hard. And so just on that alone, the vibes of it all, that has to be a contender for set of the year, even if it doesn't win my personal gold star.
It's probably second for me.
Probably second for me as well.
Interesting. So what you're telling me is that you guys, your first is Duskmourn? He says, knowing that's not the case.
That is not the case for me. I see so many people that got hyped for Duskmourn, though. Between the reaction that the public player base, I guess, gave to Bloomburrow and then into Duskmourn was so wild to me. Like, I don't know how your adrenal glands didn't just burn out from being excited for like 3 months solid.
So let me make the case for Duskmourn, because I am hesitantly saying this might be my personal set of the year. I mentioned how many of my decks were impacted by cards that came out from each set. And I mentioned that Modern Horizons 3 was tied for first in terms of like how many of my decks got cards from that set. Duskmourn was the other first place. All but 2 of my decks got cards from both Modern Horizons 3 and from Duskmourn. And Modern Horizons 3, I'd almost be willing to call that the set of the year were it not for the fact that it's a premium set that was like kind of designed to try and force that. Whereas Duskmourn took me by surprise. I think I had the opposite relationship with Duskmourn as I did for Bloomburrow. Bloomburrow, I was ready to be excited by, and then mechanically it let me down a little bit, and the limited of it certainly did not intrigue me compared to Duskmourn, where I didn't really have high expectations, but it blew those low expectations completely out of the water. And apparently it's one of the better limited sets like people are calling it an all-timer already. So that it really charmed me, even though it just kind of has the opposite reaction as I did from Bloomburrow, which is just a journey I did not see for myself.
An alternate world exists where Duskmourn is not only my set of the year, but my favorite Magic set of all time.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that is not the world we live in. We live in a world where while they were creating a really cool horror set on a really interesting plane with some fantastic mechanics like Room, which I really, really like and I think plays great in Commander.
Same.
There was also somebody there who's raising their hand in the back of the room saying, yeah, we did some market analysis and found out that stuff from the 80s is really cool. So let's also jam in some like really hokey 80s horror movie references and dudes with mullets. And therefore it is not my favorite set of all time, nor my favorite set of the year. There's a lot of things I like about it, but I would be down with a fantastic horror set, and I would probably be down with a cheesy 80s horror movie unset. Combining the two of them together really put me off what should be a set I would have loved.
Yeah, this felt very much just like they watched a lot of Stranger Things and then designed Magic cards around it. And I get it, like it's a very popular show. I felt very disconnected from this for a lot of the same reasons, Dana, that you did. Granted, now I don't want to say there aren't powerful cards. The Enduring Cycle is one of the most powerful cycles we've gotten in several years.
So good.
That cycle is just silly. I can't say enough how good that is. There's powerful cards all across the board. But again, I agree that this felt just so on the nose with some of the jokes they were making, some of the cards. It just like I struggled and just there were so many fourth wall breaks that it felt like the Magic designers were coming through the cards and like making eye contact. And it's like, hey, do you get the joke? It's like, holy cow. Do you get it? Like it's a cow and it's holy. And this set was ridden with those types of jokes that I don't like it when Magic breaks the fourth wall. It felt almost unset to me in the vibes that it gave off.
Well, just like they stopped being subtle with the allusions to the planes they were referencing, like they didn't make a subtle cowboy set nor a subtle mystery set like they did a subtle mythology set with Amonkhet. They've also stopped being subtle with the in-jokes, and they've just like, I guess it's holy cow, it's an angel cow.
It's an unwanted remake because they remake horror movies. Do you get it?
Yep.
And that type of vibe and just the elbow nudging, I'm like, don't touch me. Just leave me alone. Let me enjoy it. Let me be alone for a little bit.
So, Matt, you're not alone in this. I spoke with Ben Wheeler from Loading Ready Run during the convention about Duskmourn and feelings on that set. And his words were, I hate how much I love drafting this set. Aesthetically, this is one of the bigger misses for a lot of people out there. And I share in parts of that. Seeing the survivor characters in the set that are like completely untouched from all of the problems, I'm like, this is straining some credulity there. I'm not feeling the actual the fear that I think this set is supposed to capture. The vibes are quite off, even though most of the designs are hitting for me. And then when I actually play them, I was just so surprised by it. And it seems like a lot of people playing the limited environment felt that way too. And some of these cards are, honestly, they're really impressive to me too. Sheltered by Ghosts is an O-ring that also gives you your stuff lifelink is wild. The new Withering Torment, a new version of Black Enchantment Destruction. I really like Untimely Malfunction. We've got a new enchantment land. Like there are a bunch of things here and there that surprised me. And I kept on finding new stuff around every corner that I was like, oh, okay, go off. And so that's why I have to rank it high.
Yeah, there were lots of things to like, 100%. I will not take away from that.
Yeah, even stuff like there was some really fun demonic synergy with stuff like Demonic Covenant is a really cool card, and I've got a deck where it plays really well. There's just a lot of very, very useful things. Giggling Skitterspike, excellent card. I've got it in 2 decks.
That card's cracked.
Both weird and creepy, like aesthetically to look at, and it's just a really good card. Like there's a lot of things to like in the set for sure.
Bruh, the rooms are so cool. The Porcelain Gallery is a fantastic tokens win condition. Polluted Cistern is also just nutty. That card does so much damage when you're milling, which y'all know I love to do. Yeah, rooms have been really fascinating to build with.
Yeah, and finding a place that makes sense flavorfully for ley lines to exist, I know is kind of hard to do. So there were some really good flavor and story executions done, but that said, I mean, it was just so over the top for me that I felt disconnected from the set.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to get into it. Again, people loved it the same way people loved Bloomburrow. And so it's hard for me to call the set a failure because it definitely was not. But for me, I get to look forward to a different set instead.
Yes, and that seems like it'll take up the last little bit of our conversation here. Magic Foundations. Sounds like this is both of your guys' pick for what the set that you'll remember 2024 for.
11 out of 10.
That's the pick for you?
11 out of 10. So good.
All right, tell me why.
Yeah, it's my set of the year as well. For starters, it stands out to me because of what's around it. It's a Magic set in a year that didn't have any sets that felt to me like what I was expecting a Magic set to feel like. Mm-hmm. And I'm open to the concept that Magic is changing and is going to look different, and we are going to get Bloomburrows and Thunder Junctions and Assassin's Creeds that aren't even in the Magic universe. Like I'm accepting of that change, but I don't want it to only do that. Mm-hmm. And it was really welcome to get a set that felt like a traditional Magic set from the previous 25 years that I have grown to love and that made me love this game. So it hit on an aesthetic level for me, and it hit at a mechanical level. There's just a lot of really good cards and a lot of really good like characters that I wanted to see again. Being Magic characters versus like being detectives or cowboys. It just did all of the things I wanted from a Magic set. This is comfort food. This is your grandma making you pie or the grilled cheese on a cold fall afternoon. This is
with some tomato
the
soup.
Comfort food of a Magic set, and it is my set of the year.
That's a really good way to put it. And I was kind of struggling to find a good way to kind of sum up how I felt. Dana, you did a really good job of doing that for me. Yeah, just this feels like Magic's greatest hits, but in a way that can stand on its own. It doesn't need to like borrow from something. It feels like they believed in their own game again. Mm-hmm. And yes, there are the kind of the cutesy things there. There's a very heavy cat theme, which is great because cats are viable anyways. But again, too, there's only 12 legends in Foundations. And it feels like they're not leaning too heavily into the characters. They're letting the cards just be great, cool cards. And that's something that it feels like they haven't really done in a little bit. And so having the return of core sets like this, I love. I'm so happy that they're doing this because, like Dana said, it feels like a Magic set again. And again, I'm a paper boomer too. I will 100% admit to being that. But there's just so many fun cards that I love seeing. There's kind of better versions of some old cards. Raise the Past is just a mass reanimation, awesome spell. And there's similar things that we've seen to it, but it's just kind of the best versions of some of these things that we're getting.
Well, so real quick, Matt, you mentioned there's only 12, but that's from the main set. They also have the Jumpstart associated with Magic Foundations.
Sure.
There's like 27 legends in that one, if I'm doing my very quick math here correctly. And that is kind of connected. Dana, I think you and I have both kind of said in the past that like the Jumpstart products that are associated with something, we almost kind of like associate the way the like precons would be attached to a set. So in that case, there is still a little bit of a legend explosion, at least associated with stuff for me.
Sure.
But also like the number of legends was not going to like sway my particular evaluation one way or the other.
Sure.
The cards themselves that go into the 99 are the thing that draw my focus from Foundations. And yeah, I can't deny that there's some really impressive stuff. The new 9 Lives Familiar is very cool. I love me a new the Vane Witch Coven Vampire, a new version of Blood Artist, basically. Or that Twin Flame Dragon. Ah, that thing's wild. Double damage dragon.
Yeah, there are a lot of cards that, like, even if I don't have a deck for them, Twin Flame Dragon being one, I'm like, oh, but that's just a really cool card. Like, there's a lot of cards that even if I don't have a home for them, I can recognize them as interesting. And talking about the legends from the set, they're not a ton in the main set, but there's more in the Jumpstart. But a lot of them are really interesting legends too. Like, they are ones that you can look at and like, I can see how one could build an interesting deck from this that doesn't necessarily look like something else. So I thought it was also kind of impressive to me. This jumped out to me as a set that had a lot of legends that I thought looked like they would be fun to play. Mm-hmm. And there's a new Niv Mizzet, which doesn't count as one that's interesting or fun to play, but it's there and it's present and I will note that it exists.
Yeah, and to build off of that, it's so fun to see a lot of these really cool ideas that maybe, yes, they are one-offs, but seeing stuff like Leyline Axe, I think that's such a cool design that they're playing around with that type of idea. Okay, we have ley lines. How else can ley lines kind of influence other card types than just enchantments? It's so cool. I love seeing it. And yet they put a haiku on a card, which you have to dig a little bit to see Sire of Seven Deaths actually kind of being the haiku. But that card is bonkers powerful too. We got a new Coma. It's fun to get excited about these types of cards because it just feels like Magic is a game again.
Well, one thing I liked too is there was stuff like Blasphemous Edict I'll use for an example. That's a really good board wipe. 3 double black, it's a sorcery, and you can spend a single black rather than pay its mana value if there are 13 or more creatures in the battlefield. And it's a sacrifice effect, so people have to sacrifice the stuff as well. But in looking at like putting this into some of my decks, it's not an auto improvement over Damnation necessarily.
Right.
There's plenty of times I've cast Damnation with like three creatures in play.
Right.
Blasphemous Edict isn't always going to cost you 1 mana. You're going to be overpaying for what you'd pay for Damnation plenty often with it. And I like the fact that I'm making a choice versus something like Farewell, where it just feels like it's better than every alternative that you could have in that slot. So I thought even with the powerful cards, and Blasphemous Edict is undoubtedly a powerful card, it's a powerful card situationally, not in every deck, not all the time. And I like the fact that like you're forced to make a choice versus just automatically having a card that's better.
That tension, I love you bringing that up, Dana. That is nice to see that it doesn't feel like they're always like definitely replacing stuff. Kind of the card Banner of Kinship takes some of my attention for that reason too.
Yes, that's what I wanted to get to too.
It's a great artifact. 5 mana artifact. As it enters, you choose a creature type and it enters with a fellowship counter on it for each creature that you control of that type. And your creatures get +1 for each of those counters, which means you can proliferate. It means that your opponents can possibly interact with, they can Vampire Hexmage of those counters, which gives this a little bit of some dangerous interplay. But like, I think that's fun. But also what I contrast it to is, Coat of Arms. I could see this potentially being a better card than Coat of Arms, I suppose, but I also contrast it to Door of Destinies, which has a totally different tempo. Door of Destinies you can play on an empty board and start to build up. Banner of Kinship is more of a, all right, here's my final foray into that. But it doesn't feel like it is replacing a Door of Destinies. It feels like it's complementing it and forcing you to engage with those in a bit more of a critical way. That is a great thing to observe about this set. It is bringing some stuff back down to basics, but is also not just power creeping everything out the wazoo. There's a lot of tension in your card choices, and that's a lovely thing to see from a set for sure.
Yeah, and you had like Luminous Broodmoth from Ikoria several years ago. Now we have Valkyrie's Call, which is kind of doing a similar thing where it's reanimating a bunch of things, giving you board wipe insurance. Just there's so many powerful cards. I'm gushing right now, and I know I'm gushing, but I feel like I haven't gotten a gush like this in a long time. And there's power. If you just want some of the things like do the thing, get bonuses, there's cards like that too. Archmage of Runes is a powerful spellslinger payoff. You also had Rite of the Dragon Caller. Cast a spell, get a 5/5. Yeah. There's powerful things all over the place in this set, and we're just digging and scrolling. And I love this set. I could make a whole episode if you guys would let me about just ranting about how much I love Foundations and the marketing around it too, like letting people get back to what was Magic like when I started playing the game, those types of things. So I'm all up in my feels, just really appreciating something like that, especially just after everything that's been going on around it.
Yeah, I like the new
Lunar Insight is a card.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's 2 and a blue. Draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. Well, in the right deck, that draws you 7 cards or something for 3 mana. But it's in the right deck. Like not every deck is going to easily have that be a efficient draw spell. But some will, and I like, and it's one that I put it in a bunch of like potentials for my blue decks, and when I was looking at them, I'm like, oh, it won't quite work here. Oh, it's going to be amazing here. but I'm having to like look at my decks closely to make that choice. That's excellent card design when you have to really think about it.
Yeah. And if you really like the cheesy on the nose jokes, you have Heir Apparent. So you have kind of the silly puns.
Something for everyone, I suppose.
Yeah, they're so on the nose that you go cross-eyed, and that's great if you want those types of cards in the set too.
And I'm so thank goodness that we finally have a good and proper white creature that lets you have any number of them in the deck. The rat colony-esque thing. But I felt like that ability should have always been something that is centered in white, because white is so much about that equality and similitude and community. And so having a whole bunch of things be the same is a very mono-white thing. So I'm like so glad to finally see one of those that is truly compelling. Even silly vanilla designs like Quake Strider Ceratops, a vanilla 12/8. Like, all right, cool. The homunculus horde that copies itself as you draw a couple more cards. That's paced well because it does have a turn cap, but it also feels like a fun new way to scoot swarm a battlefield in a different color. Matt, I'm with you. This set looks fantastic. Refreshing is especially a word I would use to describe it. I think in terms of, as I mentioned that I was looking over my decks to see how many were impacted by each set. I'm projected to, add cards from Foundations into about 9 of my decks, so it doesn't quite reach the threshold of some other sets that I experienced this year. But I'm not mad about that either. I think that other sets maybe had more of an impact on me and more of a refreshing surprise on me. This set looks fantastic. It might not get my particular pick here, but like, I am mad about that. Like, this is probably my runner-up. So
luckily, we'll have 5 years to look at all of these cards and rave about how good they are.
That's the kind of thing. I wonder if my hesitation almost comes down to, am I not willing to call this the set of 2024 because I know it will be so much more impactful and felt actually in 2025? I wonder if that's sort of what causes a little bit of that hesitation for me.
There's powerful reprints. I think that's another thing that it's so easy for us to forget about is there's just bangers of reprints.
Yeah. Doubling season.
Yeah. I love this set. Oh my goodness. I'm going to start all over again, so you better take the mic from me. Mute me, editor.
I will admit, as someone who played during the glory days of Core Set 2014 or 2015, to look at a core set and be like, wow, this is amazing, is sure a weird thing to believe, because those were some rough days to get a Magic set, and you're like, wow, there's 2 good cards in the set.
All right, guys, let's kind of round things out. What was the worst set of the year? What was the lowest point?
Karlov Manor, probably.
Yeah, Karlov Manor for me as well.
Karlov Manor or Thunder Junction. Thunder Junction, for me, is tied.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, but yeah, I definitely agree. What was your runner-up set of the year? Second place.
I think Bloomburrow for me, I would say.
Okay.
Despite the long tirade I went on about Duskmourn, Duskmourn would be my follow-up set of the year because there are things about it I absolutely did love. I love the horror. It captured horror in a way that I think Innistrad never did for me. It felt like an oppressive horror plane. There was some amazing art on some amazing cards, and I loved rooms.
Same.
It was just their insistence on using, people who look like they're from the cartoon of the Ghostbusters from 1986 as survivors that put me out of it.
They had a ghost cannon. They had a ghost vacuum on the card.
Yeah. On the nose, indeed.
That will keep it from being my set of the year, but it was my runner-up for sure.
Yeah, I can't choose for runner-up. I think that Foundations will eke out Modern Horizons 3 here. Modern Horizons 3 having the premium price. There are pieces that, I have to kind of put away a little bit, but it did have a profound impact on the number of cards that went into my decks. Yeah. So I want to pay some respects on Modern Horizons 3 there.
Yeah.
But the actual refreshing world of Foundations, of like that back to basics, it feels like aesthetically, or the vibes, I think that'll be my tiebreaker. So I'll choose Foundations as my runner-up. But then we're going with the set of the year. For me, I have named Duskmourn because I'm biased.
You could name Duskmourn.
But it sounds like your guys' set of the year is
Foundations.
It is a foundational piece of Magic design that I think we got to give credit to. But also, like, of the 3 that we talked about, I don't think anybody's wrong.
Yeah.
The big 3, I guess. Well, any of the sets really. I mean, unless unless it's Karlov Manor, then you are wrong. But any other set, I don't think it's wrong to say it was your favorite set, because again, there's so many things to like from so many of the sets this year. There was so much really cool stuff they're doing in Fallout, Ravnica Remastered. They had the best basics there. But all these sets here, like there's just a lot of really good sets. I disconnected from a few of them, but then again, Foundations got it all started over for me again.
It was a very swingy year. I think that's kind of it. There were some like valleys, but also some really fantastic peaks. And it definitely seems like we peaked, especially as we were getting to the close of 2024 for Magic.
Yes.
And I would dare say the Bloomburrow, Duskmourn, Foundations run might be my best 3-set run I've seen in Magic.
In a while. Yeah.
Like this back half of the year might be my favorite set, my favorite chunk of a year in terms of new Magic product being released.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see Mark Rosewater's article about kind of breaking down the sets that came out this year and what they learned from it. I guess if I were to contribute something to that, I want to praise that what they were trying to do for so long with some of these sets at the beginning of the year, they finally got into a groove at the end of the year. And thankfully, they had a Magic set that kind of felt like a Magic set again, which again, Foundation's my favorite set of the year. But even Bloomburrow, they found a way to kind of take the outside forces that they were working with and adjust it to fit within the parameters of what Magic is trying to do.
I do suspect that in a future State of Design article, we might see that our tropes were too on the nose point once again. Sure. Seems like a possibility. But I also think that a lot of the good lessons that were takeaways from 2024 were resoundingly good. Because we all found some different things to fall in love with, even if it was by surprise. And when Magic sets surprise you, that's where we get so much of that joy. So like overall, I think the Magic is ending on a pretty fantastic note. And I'm glad that it went like we crested upwards as opposed to the latter sets of the year feeling like a bummer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So listeners, you have got to let us know what your favorite sets of the year were and what metrics do you use to come to that decision and what were your runner-ups, and maybe also if you want to share the low point. We'll see if there's anyone who thinks that Foundations is the low point. Matt, I'm sure that you would absolutely adore seeing.
Or someone telling us that Karlov Manor was our favorite set of all time too. Like I'm sure there's someone out there that connected with it in some way that it didn't for us.
I don't think so. I think our silence is proving that right now. But if you are, please let us know. I mean, we appreciate, we want to hear from everybody too. I mean, even if you are, like I said, wrong, it's okay to be. We're wrong here too.
Yeah, overall, we've got some good energy ending on 2024 for Magic, and I'm interested to see how the energy transitions into 2025 and what things will unfold in the year to come. For now, though, listeners, we got to hear from you again about what your favorite set was. What was your set of the year? And if you want to get in touch with us to tell us all about that, hey guys, where can our listeners find us on the onlines? Matt?
You can find me on pretty much any social media platform at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget, we are proud members of Team Ultimate Guard. So if you need some of the best accessories to protect your cards, you need the sleeves, you need the deck boxes, check out Ultimate Guard for the best out there.
And Dana.
You can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm writing articles for EDHREC and Commander's Herald. You can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And I'm Joey Schultz. You can find me everywhere online at Joseph M. Schultz, most likely being a fool on Instagram or something like that. And you can find the cast everywhere at EDHRECast. And if you've got a question for us or maybe a challenge the stats submission you'd like to send our way, you can contact us at EDHRECast@gmail.com. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until then, remember, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.